All right, welcome everybody to the start of the afternoon sessions. Today, here we're going to have Tom Davis explain to you guys about Confrontation and Judge Calls and Beyond. Don't forget at the end of the presentation to fill out the feedback form. There's a little handy dandy QR code and link on the back of the schedule, so make sure you all fill that out as well so you can get some shiny stuff at the end. Woo. Take it away.
All right. Well, hello, everyone. I hope you're here to talk about confrontation, otherwise we might have to have a little talk. All right, so this presentation is going to be on, as you see, confrontation and you. We're going to extend beyond the judge life. We're going to talk about confrontation in general, when it happens, and some things that you can do to get the most out of confrontation so that you don't feel like crap for it. All right, so a little about me. If you don't know me, my name's Tom. I'm a level 2 judge from out in Worcester, New York. That's near Rochester. And my email is listed here. I'm going to also have it at the end of the conference. If you have any questions that you forget to ask during this conference, feel free to email me. I'll have that up at the end as well. All right, well, let's get right to it. So, when you hear the word confrontation, what does that mean to you? What do you envision? Amanda?
Something that sort of breaks your sense of comfort.
All right. Do you want to give an example?
Sure. Let's say I go over to answer a judge. I know that we're moving outside of judge call for this is easier.
Sure, go ahead.
I go over to a judge call and you're like, hey, how can I assist you? And the player starts off by being, well, this fucking guy started to cheat me.
Sure.
And you're like, oh, that's not how I expected this to start today.
So, player aggression.
Yeah.
Is that a good way of summarizing it? Sure. What other people see, judge-wise or life-wise? Steve?
Confrontation, I don't think necessarily needs to be aggressive, but there does need to at least be a sensed chance of like tension. Like for example, like my boss wants to do something this way, and I think they're wrong. Well, because it's my boss disagreeing, it has a certain like possible repercussion for me. So I feel like I'm confronting, and that can there I guess. As in sense of repercussion.
Repercussion from superiority.
Or just
in general.
And from bringing up a conflicting point. Maybe.
Sure. So conflicting points, fear of repercussion.
Yeah.
All right. Rita?
Confrontation, it can happen anytime that you are trying to address an issue where you can see a problem. And unlike the other examples, I've had a number of instances recently where I've had to address issues with friends, and it's, I guess it is, or it's become a confrontation because there's even just a difference in the way we're approaching a particular situation, and trying to address that difference creates that confrontation.
Sure. So differences in opinion.
Yeah.
All right. One more. What's your name? It is where you're sure. Sorry. Joshua, go ahead.
I was just going to say, when you say what do you envision, for me, so I think of a situation where you have escalated emotions that you kind of, while it's happening, have this foreboding thought of you're going to regret something after you've done it.
Sure. So situation where you might cause some regret.
Yeah.
All right. So a couple trends that I'm hearing here. I hear the word difference a lot. I heard the word regret. I heard the word repercussions. And these are all pretty, most of the time, negative words, correct? So let me show you a couple of examples of what I envision when I see conflict. So maybe it's something like this, where it's a physical altercation, a physical confrontation. Now as judges, I am not going to advocate for a second that you get involved in a physical altercation. That is not what this chat is about. All right, but this is one type where fisticuffs are flying. All right, let's take another type. Who knows the game Overwatch? All right, sometimes it can be a fun confrontation where you're trying to beat an opponent in a virtual stage, where you're trying to accomplish something to beat someone. All right? Or, I think we've all had a little bit of experience with the recent election recently. All right? There was a lot of confrontation the last few months. I think we can all agree on that, regardless of who you supported, if you didn't vote, whatever. There was definitely confrontation in the political arena recently, correct? All right, so verbal confrontation for the most part is what happened here. Shouting matches. All right? This one I want to harp on for a minute. I feel that confrontation doesn't require two people. All right? And a lot of folks don't see internal confrontation as the first thing they think of when they think of the word confrontation. A lot of times as judges, we have a lot of internal drama. And this goes in a judge call, this goes in life, this goes at work. Internal paranoia, internal anxiety. Oh my God, am I doing this right? Is something bad going to happen to me for how I'm about to approach a situation? Kind of just like an internal communication that goes on. Internal differences you even have. One thing I don't see many people think of confrontation as is a handshake. And let's think about that for a second. Confrontation in and of itself is something you're going to have to deal with. This talk isn't me telling you, if you listen to what I'm about to say, you're never going to have a confrontation again. Right? I think we can all agree that we're going to have some kind of confrontation in our lives. If not now, very quickly in the future, it's going to happen to us. All right? I bring up this handshake because there is always an end to a confrontation. And we would love that end to be amicable, correct? All right. So I want to bring up a quote by a psychoanalyst by the name of M. Esther Harding, who said that conflict is the beginning of consciousness. All right? This quote resonates with me because it's not a way of saying confrontation is bad. A lot of people, when they think on the surface of confrontation, is they want to avoid it. Everyone would be happier if they never had to deal with a confrontation, right? I find the opposite. A lot of times, sure, confrontation is not something I want to do, but I also try to take the opportunity to say, maybe I can learn something from this. Maybe I can begin to reach an understanding from what this confrontation is. All right, and having that confrontation, having that conflict, is the beginning of something better. Correct? All right. So, I mentioned earlier, confrontation is inevitable. All right? Whether it's at work, school, play, on your own, and yes, when judging. I wouldn't be standing up here talking to you all if it didn't have to do with judging, right? So, confrontation is something that I don't want to tell you to avoid, because it's going to happen. If you try to avoid it, it's going to run right after you and smack you in the face anyway. All right? Rather, I want confrontation to be something that we all strive to resolve. All right? It's going to happen. I'm going to talk about a couple things that I've learned in the workplace and in life to help me get through these confrontational scenarios. Not necessarily solve them and make everything hunky-dory, but to be able to take something away from that situation so that you're not hurting yourself over it internally. To avoid that self-avoidance, to avoid that self-doubt. All right? But we're all judges here, so let's talk a couple things that I found in the judging world for confrontation. First, the good old judgment call. I come up to a table with Rob here, I'm playing a match with him, and we get into this nice little heated conflict where it's a he said, she said scenario. Okay? We both fail to agree on reality. We're not going to be able to come to terms with this, and that's why we get a judge involved. All right? Policy disagreements. I may think policy works one way when I'm talking to a judge. That judge may think something completely different, and we won't be able to agree on it right away. Angry players. This was brought up earlier. Players that come to you in a very heated stance over something. Maybe they disagree with their opponent over something, and your first interaction with them is of anger. They're yelling at you over something the opponent may have said. Or maybe they're angry at you for a judge call you made that they disagreed with. All right? Angry players are a facet of magic. We're not going to, it's going to happen, I guess is what I should say. All right? Internal strife. And I know I've had this one before. God, did I get that call right? When I'm talking to a player, am I saying the right things to them? Are they going to understand what I'm trying to get at? Like, sure, I can make a correct ruling, but am I going to be able to deliver it properly? And folks can get nervous about that on how they're going to present themselves. They might have a very good knowledge of the rules, but they might not have a very good way of delivering, and it causes internal conflict. Right? And non-player disagreement. So maybe you have a quarrel with a tournament organizer over the way a tournament should be run. Maybe you have a certain way you want to judge an event that's against what the tournament organizer has done. Maybe you want to be a change agent to make your tournament a better place for your players, and the tournament organizer wants to keep the old hat. All right? So my point in all of this is confrontation and judging can come from a bunch of different arenas. It's not always a judge handling two angry players. It's a judge talking to a judge. It's a judge talking to an organizer. It's a judge talking to one or more players, an audience, a spectator. Or in life, it could just be you talking to anyone. Right? And so what I want to get at is some ways to handle it. And I want to emphasize this again. Me saying that we're going to be able to handle confrontation is not always going to say that the confrontation is going to come out in your favor. All right? It's just some ways to approach a situation that you may otherwise find undesirable. All right? And what I want to bring into play here is it's actually a book. All right? It's a book that I got at my workplace. It's called The 4 Agreements. All right? Has anyone here heard of The 4 Agreements? Show of hands. 1, 2. All right, good. 3. I think I saw a third. All right. So for the majority of you, you don't know what this is, and that's awesome. So what I want to do is I want to kind of bring a couple core facets of personal growth into this whole conversation about confrontation. All right? So first, a little bit of a preface. The 4 Agreements is written by Mexican author Don Miguel Ruiz. And for me, it's like a personal growth mecca. It has a bunch of very good kind of nuggets of wisdom for me to get by in life, to get by in disagreements, etc. Right? Something that I gather from it, it encourages your own personal freedom and independence from negativity so that you get to reduce limitation and you get to increase happiness in your life. Not eliminate the negative stressors, but to be able to come back from it as a happier person. Does that make sense to everybody? All right. So, I'm a quote person. I like quotes. All right. This is a quote straight from the book by the author. And it says, "Life is like dancing. If we have a big floor, many people will dance. Some will get angry when the rhythm changes, but life is changing all the time." All right. Life evolves. Life goes on. Life isn't the same way every day when we wake up, right? And I like to compare this to a judge floor. Players are dancing. Judges are dancing. We're all doing this rhythm in a tournament. Right? Sometimes the players aren't going to like the way you dance. They're not going to like the way you make a call. Sometimes judges aren't going to like the way you make a call. All right? That being said, life, judging, your experiences are always going to change, and I think we should learn from them. All right? So, I keep saying there's 4 agreements, or there has to be 4 of something I want to talk about, right? So I'm going to start with the first 2, we're going to move on to the next 2, and then we'll move from there. All right? So in general, the first is to be impeccable with your word. Sorry, I clicked. All right? And so I have a couple examples here. So when I say the word impeccable, what does that mean to you all?
Perfect.
I'm sorry?
Perfect.
Perfect. All right? Anyone else?
Exemplary.
Exemplary. It's a good word. I like that. Success?
Precise.
Precise. All right, Matt?
To the best of your ability.
To the best of your ability. Funny you should say that. We'll get back to that. Manny?
Not missing anything.
Not missing anything. Do you want to elaborate a little bit on that?
There wasn't something else that you should have done or that should have been a component in doing it well that you did not do.
So you did everything in your power.
You did everything that should have been done.
Okay. So you and Matt bring up interesting points. I think we're going to get back to that later on. Anybody else? What's your name? What's your name?
Alex,
Okay.
without reproach,
I'm sorry?
without reproach.
Without reproach. Okay. Anybody else? All right, that's fine. So those are all very good. I don't disagree with any of them. I particularly like the one that talks about without reproach. I like that a lot. And that's not something that I really had thought of before, so thank you for bringing that up. All right, so when I saw the word impeccable, I think of integrity. All right, integrity in words, integrity in actions, integrity in whatever I'm doing at that time. All right, also, I want to be able to say what I mean. I don't want to cut corners. I don't want to sugarcoat things. I want to be able to say exactly what I'm thinking at the time. Third, I want to be able to speak for myself and not against myself. And when I say speaking for myself, speaking for what I believe in, not for what I don't believe someone else believes in. Right? And then I also like body language in this, because my word is not always going to be verbal. A lot of times the way I present my words is going to be visual. For instance, if I'm taking a judge call, and I feel really confident about my call, and I'm going to walk up here, I'm going to take this call for Kush, I'm just going to stand over his head the whole time. Sure, I feel really confident in that, but the body language almost makes me feel like I'm above you. All right? So confidence can also be cockiness in sort of way, right? So rather, if I want my body language to speak in a way that I would like other people to perceive that as, I want to be able to get on his level. And first, deliver verbally what I need to say, but also visually make him understand what I'm saying, so that we both get something out of the interaction. All right. The second agreement is to not make assumptions, and I'm gonna be talking a lot about assumptions as it comes to judging. But in life, we all know the classic adage. When you assume, what do? Make an ass out of you and me. Okay? People say that a lot, and it has some merit to it. All right? When you assume, you're not getting the full story, and that can come back to bite you. All right? So ask questions. It's never a bad thing to ask questions, especially when you're judging. But also in the workplace, if you don't understand how something works, if you don't understand a piece of code, if you don't understand a document, ask a question about it. Learn. Express what you really want. All right? And the way to express what you really want, ask questions. Next, communicate clearly. And that will help to avoid misunderstandings. And I know we tell this to players all the time, talk to one another. That doesn't mean they're going to. All right? So just kind of remembering when you're in, whatever you're doing in life, and I didn't click fast enough, so I'm going to bring this back. Just being able to talk to one another instead of at one another is very important. And that helps to avoid misunderstandings, it helps to avoid disagreements, and it helps, in the judge realm, helps to avoid judge calls. All right? When players talk to one another and they're not afraid to just say how they feel about something, and they just communicate clearly to one another what's going on, of course I want to be able to not say, just say how you feel and then just have them yell at the opponent. Like, I'm so mad at you. But just being able to not have to beat around the bush. Just say what you're going to do, and then do it. Right? And then finally, while you're talking to one another, you want to make sure you also hear each other out. Because listening requires talking, for the most part. In order to get something out of a conversation, you also have to listen to it. Right? So be willing to talk and be willing to hear. Any questions on those two? Seeing none. All right. Next, numbers 3 and 4. All right? The next one is the hardest one for me to do, and I think for a lot of people it can be a difficulty, and that is to not take anything personally. All right? It is my belief, and it's the book's belief, because I read the book, I learned from this, that nothing others do is because of you directly, but rather it is a projection of what they feel reality is. And I give an example in judging, where if I take a judge call, and I deliver a ruling, and I deliver a correct ruling, but the opponent doesn't like it, or the person I'm talking to doesn't like it, they might react in a way that makes you feel like you're to blame for their problem. Like if they yell at you because you just cost them the tournament, that is not them personally saying something to attack your character. It is the fact that they are upset at their own perception of what's going on in the game. All right? And oftentimes, yes, we have to hear the other end of that, but it's important for us to not take that to heart. All right? When we take that to heart, we have issues of self-doubt. All right? Self-doubt, self-deprivation, you feel like you're a failure because they yelled at you, and just other very kind of negative internal emotions because of that, right? How many people here at a Magic tournament have had a player get angry at them? Most of the hands in the room. Now, with those hands still up, how many people felt badly about that when they got home? I still see a lot of hands. All right, so something about that interaction tells me, gods, was that me that did that? And it lingers. You have that lingering doubt on the drive home, on the walk home, however you get home from a tournament. That makes you potentially say, did I screw this up even though I feel like I was right? All right? I think it's important that we attempt, and I emphasize the word attempt because nobody's perfect, is that we attempt to grow a sort of immunity from the opinions and actions of others, as we are not able to change what others do. All right? We're only able to change how we react to the things that others do. All right? And if you make a mistake, sure, mistakes are going to happen. As long as you are, and I'm going to harp on first this and then the last agreement, which is why I'm coming back to what Matt and Manny said earlier. If you are impeccable with your word, you're being truthful. All right? You're using whatever resources you have to make the best call you can at the time. All right? And that doesn't mean you're always going to be right. But being able to learn from it instead of letting it linger and hurt you will grow leaps and bounds when you deal with confrontational scenarios. Okay? All right, the fourth agreement. Always do your best. How many people here have, in life, in judging, anything you want to feel comfortable sharing a hand about, felt like they didn't give 100%? My hand's up. I think most people's hands are up here. All right? We often feel like we didn't try our hardest. All right? So there's a couple things I want to talk about there. First, your best is going to change over time. For instance, maybe one day you're feeling 100%, you know exactly what you need to do, you know exactly what your best is, and you give 110% at work, right? The next day you're sick. You know, you're sick at home, you're taking a sick day, and you feel like nothing you're doing is good. You just kind of lackadaisically go through the day. I hate my laptop. Sorry about that. All right. Maybe one day, and this is kind of personal for me, you get let go from your job. And this happened to me a couple days ago. All right. That anxiety is real. All right. Nothing that I did that day felt like I was ever doing my best. All right. Anxiety is real. Depression is a real thing. That is going to affect how you perform, naturally. And it's going to affect what your best is. If you always approach a situation, regardless of your mood, or at the end of that confrontation, at the end of that issue, you can say, I did everything that I could given where I was at. You can hold your head high. All right? That is what you can control. Externally, you can't control how others perceive that. But if you can walk away from a situation saying, I gave it my all, good. There's nothing anybody can say to you that you should have to take personally because of that. And that's how I'm kind of tying those two together. If you do your best, don't take it, like, obviously, take criticism, like, as an opportunity to grow, but don't take it as a personal attack. All right? Make sense? All right, so I want to go into judging a little bit. And I've kind of grouped these up in my own personal sphere of importance. If you have a different perception of this, that's fine. The images on here are just kind of fun, so if you can't see exactly what the images say, don't worry about it. If you can, cool. All right, so I've already mentioned this. I feel like the most important facet in judging in terms of confrontational scenarios, don't make assumptions about anything. Always make sure that you get the full story of what's going on when you're at a table. For those that were in Manny's presentation earlier today on making judge calls great, one of the things that he really keyed on was being able to ask those open and closed questions that let you get the full story. If you go making a judge call based on assumptions, like for instance, if I'm walking over to Steve here, I look at the game state, that's clearly not here, but I'm going to imagine there's a game state here for the sake of argument. If I just look at the game state, I ask one person one close-ended question, like, did you play that this turn? If he says yes or no, and I make a ruling based on that, sure, you made a ruling, maybe it's even right, but you didn't get the full story. I think we can all agree on that. In Magic and in life, you don't want to assume what's going on. People have the ability to ask questions to gather information, and we should take every opportunity to do that. All right? And the other three, I think, kind of circle around that whole don't make assumptions bit. For instance, being impeccable with your word. I just mentioned, ask questions. Get the full story. All right? Leave nothing to chance. Be willing to listen to the people you're talking to and be willing to ask those questions. All right? When you hear somebody, they will know that you are listening to them. All right? Approach a situation in a way that you would like to be approached when you're, like, maybe you're playing a tournament. I'm sure when you have a judge come over to answer a question, you want to make sure that you feel like you're heard. Right? So just, again, I can't harp enough to just say what you mean, but say it in a way that's respectful. Okay? Next, always do your best. All right? In a judging scenario, maybe you've had a bad day. All right? Maybe you're judging an event and you failed an L2 exam, or you failed an L1 exam, but you still have to judge for the rest of the day. And this is where I get to that your best will change. All right? That doesn't mean you can't do your best. It's just that your evaluation of your best may be different from day to day. All right? Do your best in a judging scenario to make that call to the best of your ability. If you can walk away from a judge table saying, I did everything I could to make that call great, everything else is external. A player's reaction is external. There's going to be a reaction. There's almost certainly a reaction to a judge call, whether it's positive or negative. All right? As long as you do your best to deliver that ruling to the player in a way that you and they understand, the rest of it is ephemeral. All right? And finally, not taking anything personally in the judge realm is very hard to do. All right? This is personally and in judging, and I mentioned this already, this is the hardest thing for me to do. Just because I don't have this in the center doesn't mean it's not vital. All right? A lot of times somebody's going to yell at you over a ruling. You're going to disqualify a player, and they're going to say, well, you should have disqualified the other person because they're a cheating scumbag. All right? Sure, maybe that person needs to be investigated. But that yelling is an outlash of what has just happened to them, not something you did. All right? If you DQ somebody based on policy because you found that they were cheating, disqualification is going to happen. Nobody likes being disqualified, right? When you get disqualified, who's the first person you're going to blame for that disqualification? The judge. The opponent. That's a valid response.
Someone else.
There you go. Not you. Anyone but you. All right? You want to find somebody to attach that blame to. And when you find that person, you're going to let them have it. All right? And that's going to feel like a personal attack, and it's going to hurt, and it's going to sting, and you're going to think about that for a while after it's over. That doesn't mean you did anything wrong. All right? As long as you do all you can to follow policy, to follow a call, to do any of that. Again, what comes back to you is external. You can't control a reaction. Fair? All right. So I'm going to go into a couple of these in more detail as they relate to judging, and then I think we're going to have time for some scenarios before we end. All right? I also have some giveaways. Ooh. Free stuff. So again, for those that have participated already, awesome. I would definitely encourage more communication as we go on. And I'm gonna try and get through at least 2 scenarios. I have 3 ready. And at the end of all that, I have something I'm gonna give. I'm gonna answer questions. We're gonna move on. All right? So let's go into these in a little more detail. Being impeccable with your word and judging. And we've talked about some of these. Folks have brought up these facets already. Don't cut corners. When you cut corners to maybe try and save time on a call so you don't have to give a 4-minute extension versus a 2-minute extension, you miss things. All right? Trust yourself. You're a judge for a reason. All right? Maybe it's just because you passed an exam and you felt like you could answer 25 questions correctly. Sure, that's a thing, but you answer those questions correctly. All right? The reason that you are judging an event is because someone put you in a level of trust to run their event successfully. All right? Isolate the external and thrive in the internal. Everything around you is something you can't control, and I've mentioned this already. Take take pride in the things you can control and make your best effort with the things you can control. All right? And finally, your knowledge is your lifeline. Trust it. And this goes beyond rules knowledge. Social interactions with opponents. Ways that you approach discussions with opponents. Obviously, knowing the rules is important. Okay? Trust in yourself so that when you get into a situation where somebody might question you, sure, take that criticism, take that question, be able to process that, but don't have that be a crutch for you to doubt yourself on your own call. Be as confident as you can be given a situation. Okay? Next up, again, not taking anything personally. Players, TOs, other judges even. I've seen some very angry judges in my time. All right? They're not always going to react well. It's not on you as long as you're doing your best to make the situation good. As long as you're trying to find a resolution to a confrontation. Again, reactions are external. That whole confrontation or negative reaction, it's more of a reflection of their understanding of things as they believe it, not a personal attack on you. So if somebody believes you're wrong, they're going to make you think that you're wrong. If you know you're right, and if you did your best to make the best ruling, try and tune it out. I know it's hard to. I know it's very hard to. But try not to take that personally at the end of the day. You did everything you could to make that player's experience better. All right? Be direct, poignant, and listen. All right? Ask the questions you need to ask, hear what you need to hear, and be able to give that ruling in the best way you can. Again, criticism is fine. It's not a personal attack. Somebody's going to disagree with you on something. Fair? Being upset is okay. It is okay for somebody to react negatively to a situation. All right? If I'd have had a judge call that went against me, that cost me a tournament. It could very well be the right call, but I still lost. And that's going to suck, right? So I'm not saying when you don't take anything personally, not to be upset and to always be happy. You can be upset, but just realize that that is an external reflection on an interaction that has occurred, not on somebody's personal behavior. All right? And finally, use the words of others as a tool and not as a catalyst for self-destruction. And what I mean by that goes back to criticism. Use the words that other people tell you, maybe in feedback, maybe in reviews, to learn from it and not beat yourself up over it. Again, show of hands. How many people here have ever gotten a judge review? I would hope every hand is up. And if not, make sure you get reviews. All right, same hands. How many of you have ever had a review that is all positive? That's more hands than I thought I would see, to be honest. All right, how many people have ever had a review where it's all negative? I was expecting about that many. So let's talk about that for a minute. Reviews are different to everyone. Some people like to use reviews to praise other judges and to only focus on the good things that they saw. Other judges like to use reviews as a way, and I'm going to say this quite bluntly, to criticize negatively the entire time. There's both positive and negative criticism, right? I think we can all agree on that. Some like to use opportunities to review people as opportunities to bash people. That goes beyond judging. If you ever had a peer review at work and they just kept bashing everything you did, it feels pretty bad, doesn't it? All right? But, and I say but with a silver lining, if the effort that you gave to cause that review was the best that you could do, take the criticism to heart, take the criticism as a chance to grow, but don't beat yourself up too much over it, if at all. Because you did everything you could to succeed. Criticism is a chance to learn in that case. All right? Don't beat yourself up, learn from it, and be better. All right? Any questions on that? Yeah?
I think, like, even in situations where I know I didn't do my best, and
Okay.
where I got reviews that sort of stated that I didn't meet my expectations, I definitely could have done more.
Mhm.
Even there, I think, like, I don't really want to beat myself up over that. I want to take that as, like, as something to grow.
Yeah.
And as
And you bring up an interesting point. You mentioned that someone else told you that you weren't doing your best. And I would counter that with, how does that person know what my best is right now? All right, there are a lot of things that can affect what your peak performance is at any given time. Maybe you're sick that day. Maybe you had a personal issue come up that's just, kind of lingering over your head. I would like to extend on what you said by saying, look, any one person here is not going to be able to tell me on any given day what my best is. The only person that can tell me what my best is in a moment is me. All right? Other people can deduce other people can deduce what my best is, sure. But you shouldn't take that as a way to beat yourself up. You know what your best is. Other people can think about it, but you know. Okay? But you bring up a very good point. In the back.
Could you explain the difference on taking things critically and taking things too harshly?
Yes. Most of the time. Because taking things critically, for a lot of people, is trying to admit that you made a mistake. Or somebody else saying that you made a mistake. All right? I like to approach criticism as an opportunity to grow. When I take it too harshly, I beat myself up over it. And the line between those two can vary from person to person. If I'm Rob, which Rob's an awesome human being, if I give Rob criticism on something, wait, what was that, Rob?
Oh, nothing.
Now, if I give Rob a piece of criticism and he's had a really, frankly, shitty day, sure, maybe he's going to take that super harshly. That doesn't mean the person presenting the criticism wasn't trying to make them grow. The external reaction to that is, well, you saw something I needed to do. Thanks for telling me whenever I already had an already awful day. And you're going to take that probably worse than, if you feel like, I had a really good GP. And yeah, I got a piece of criticism that said that I talked way too fast and I was calling a draft. That's something I can learn from. And I think that takes a lot of personal growth to say, I can learn from this, as opposed to, I can't learn from this. And when we get into the mindset where we can't grow from this is where I feel like I start to take things harshly and beat myself up over it. Does that make sense? Cool. Any other questions before I move on? Yeah.
So you talked about, wow, I might just totally blank. You talked about how you know what your best is, others don't. How do you know what your best is at any given time?
Sometimes you don't. You bring up a very good point. But you're the only person who can really determine that for yourself. And it's going to be an internal question, where what is my best when I wake up? What is my best in the middle of the day? That's not a question. That's not a question anybody can answer for you. It's always going to be a gut feeling that you have. And whatever you feel like your best is at the time is probably close to what your best is. And I don't think there's really much more of a way for me to answer that. So it's always going to be a gut feeling as to what you feel you can accomplish. Okay? All right, let's move on because I want to make sure we get to our scenarios. If you have any other questions, I will look at them at the end of the presentation. I will answer them, and if I don't, feel free to email me, we'll talk. All right? Always doing your best. It's real easy for me to look at a group of people and say, do everything I ask you to. All right? That is a very loaded question, by the way, or a very loaded statement. Do everything I ask. All right? When I say do your best, I don't always mean do everything you're told. Do everything that you can to succeed in the end. Is that a question in the back or just an arm? Okay. All right. For those that watch Star Trek, there's a rather famous quote by one of the captains that says, it's possible to make no mistakes and still lose. That's not a weakness, that's life. And that's Jean-Luc Picard. So, yeah. All right. So when you're working as a judge, when you're working in life, it's possible that you're going to always do your best. You're always going to do what you can to excel. You're going to feel like you don't make any mistakes and you still feel like you failed. All right? That's not a weakness. All right? Sometimes we just don't get there. All right? Sometimes at work, I did everything I could to make this project work. And I still spent 40 hours more than my budget allowed. All right? I did my best to get there, and I didn't get there in the end. It was late. We ended up delivering a week late, etc. When I judge, well, I did everything I could to make that player's experience as good as possible, but they're still leaving a store yelling at me. All right? That happens. All right? As long as we can internalize that we did everything we could to attempt to make their day better, everything else is external. All right? And that's not a weakness. That's just how things go. All right? Give 100%. Don't leave anything on the proverbial battlefield, as it were. All right? Walk into every situation, or walk into every confrontation, and be able to give your all to attempt to resolve it. All right? Share your side of things. You know, share your thoughts, share your beliefs, share why you feel what you're saying matters. All right? Don't leave anything to chance, but don't leave anything as an assumption. Again, learn from the result of a confrontation, whether it be good or bad. Confrontations aren't always going to go your way. Debates aren't always going to go your way. Elections aren't always going to go your way. Life isn't always going to go your way. Okay? Learn from what happened and do your best to not make that an opportunity to hurt yourself internally. All right? And related to that, hold your head high. And I believe this to the fullest extent. And this is, if there is one takeaway from this that I want you to get from doing your best, it's this. Nobody can ask you for more than your best. All right? They can tell you, do these 15 things. If your best is 10 of them and you do all 10, sure, you have to explain to them why 5 of them didn't get done. But you need to be the person who decides, did I do everything I could to try and get this done? All right? You are the person that can best judge your own success. And just as a reminder, your best is going to change circumstantially. We've talked about that several times. All right? And I left don't make assumptions for the end, again, because I feel like it's the most important thing that we can do to make a player's experience better when judging. All right? First, listen to the other side. Your side isn't always correct. All right? Listen to other players, if you're in a player-to-judge or a player-to-player interaction. Listen to other judges, if you're, for say, dealing with an appeal. Listen to what they had to say to aid to that discussion. But also listen to yourself. Again, trust in your knowledge in every one of these scenarios. Sometimes you're going to be wrong. All right? Sometimes you're going to be wrong, and you did the best you could to do that, but make sure that you leave nothing to chance. Don't make assumptions on any of that. All right? Get the full story. Get every bit of information that you can to come to a full conclusion. Stop and think. Is this everything I could be asking? Is this everything that I'm getting out of this scenario? And finally, while we're internalizing everything, we want to make sure that we're asking everything. What other people say is important. So if you ask a question about one thing and they open up about 3 others, not all of them may contribute to your final decision, but all of them are important to the person who's talking to you about that. Otherwise, they wouldn't be saying it to you. All right? So make sure when you're in those scenarios that you let people have their say. Their thoughts are important, even if they don't change your decision in the end. Okay? All right. Do we have any questions on those things before we go to, I think we have time for probably 2 scenarios. Hearing none. All right. So we might have time for 1, we might have time for 2. But what I want are, I need 3 individuals for this.
I volunteer should be.
Jeez, all right. All right, who wants to be a judge? Amanda. Coming up. You'll read everything you need to read. All right, I need 2 players.
That'd be Chris.
Steve. And Chris. All right, so I'm going to give each of you a scenario that relates. And once I give you this, I'd like you to step out of the room for a minute. All right, I'll bring you back in when we're ready, and we'll go from there. All right, so players, you're player 1, you're player 2. You're the judge. Go read. All right.
Out the room?
Yes, exit the room for a second, because I want to explain what all the scenarios are without you guys getting additional info.
Okay.
All right, so a couple ground rules for this. First, things are going to be a little heated. All right? The point of this is to create a confrontation. All right? Now, there might be times in this where I pause it just to get a feel for what they're saying, how you guys might feel they might, if you were in that situation, how you might internalize it, how you might react if you were in a similar situation, or honestly, I might ask them how they feel. All right? So if I pause, it's not a bad thing. I just want an opportunity for discussion. All right? So with that, I'm going to go ahead and go to the first confrontation, and I just want to explain to you all what's going on. So for the two players, we're playing in a, let's say, a standard PPTQ, and first player is casting Archangel Avacyn to save their team from a powerful attack or whatever, but they never mention that indestructible trigger. All right? They don't move any permanents to the graveyard when damage occurs. As a note, your opponent has been rules lawyering you the entire match. All right? So the italicized part is how I'm instructing them to kind of behave, but they're only getting that part. All right, so for the player who cast the Archangel, I want them to act aggravated. Act as if you're casting them after blocks to try and make it the last possible scenario. And I have not told the judge how to rule. All right, so I've given each of them different ways to react based on how the judge rules here. So the second player knows that the opponent has cast the Archangel Avacyn, and they know that they never mention the indestructible trigger. All right? When damage was happened, they refused to move the permanents. This player is a level 2 judge. All right? And as a level 2, you're going to argue with the opponent a lot that the creature should be dead. All right? So the main thing that I want them to do is to assert their level, to assert that they're a judge. All right? To make sure the opponent knows they're wrong. Even if you know in reality, in terms of meta, that's not the case. All right? When your opponent continues to refuse to move the creatures, call a judge angrily. All right? And that's when the judge is going to come in, listen to the situation, and make a ruling. And they're going to react accordingly. Make sense? All right. I'm going to bring them in, and we're just going to do this. Yep, come on.
I feel fancy.
This is classy, don't you know?
Wait, Tom, I have a question for you.
Yep.
I have to look up rolls and know my roll.
Okay.
Cool. That's how much I judge these days.
All right.
All right.
So there isn't going to be a physical board state. I think both of you should hypothetically know what's going on, correct?
That's how you hold your cards.
I got a whole bunch of cards in my hand.
Oh, I got to pretend. All right. We need what? Yes. So for the sake of time, let's just move on.
All right. So you're attacking me?
Yeah. All right, guys.
Louder.
Be a little louder, please, just so they can hear.
So the attacks?
Sure.
Okay. Block with this, block with this, block with this.
All right, go to damage.
No. Avacyn.
I guess sure. Why not?
Okay. Damage.
Okay. Your creatures die.
No. Avacyn.
No, like
Why would I mean, seriously, I gotta spell it out for you.
like, really, bro? Like, I want judge.
All right, pause right there for a second. Steve, what did you say right before you called the judge?
Do I have to spell it out for you?
Do I have to spell it out for you? Sounds like kind of a attack of sorts, right? All right. Why do we think he said that the way he did? Anybody want to fathom? Matt.
Because he's a judge and he.
They both know. Go on.
Well, because he believes he has a vastly superior knowledge of the rules compared to his opponent. So.
Okay, Manny.
I was just going to say the same thing, but that ended on he's frustrated with his opponent and he feels his opponent is on a lower play level.
Okay, he's lower.
Because his opponent's been a rules-learning jerk to him the whole match, so it's him finally snapping.
Okay.
Of, fuck you, buddy.
All right, one more. Sean. Shortcuts. Okay.
Why you protect your own creatures?
Okay, maybe I wouldn't use a shortcut there, but or the word shortcut, but your method. Your reasoning is sound. All right. All right. So that's what I wanted to go through for that. Continue. Make a call.
All right, Judge. All right, so I'm no.
Hey.
Go ahead. So here's what's happening right now.
Okay.
This player thinks that his creature does not die when Avison trigger. He didn't announce the trigger for Avison, and when we go to damage, he's refusing to pick up his permanents to go to the graveyard.
Okay, so how, from your perspective, what happened?
Well, so he attacked. I blocked. He asked if I was ready for damage, and I responded that I was going to play Avison. And we all know what Avison does. Like, why would I play it otherwise? And he's like, okay, like, you know, and then, you know, we're like, okay, cool, like, done, right? Damage. And he's like, your guys die. And I'm like, and he's like, I'm like, what? I just played Avison. Like, come on. Like, why would I do this?
All right, what game is this?
I think it's match. No, game 3.
Okay.
I guess so.
Have you played Avison at any other point?
What, I think I played in game 1.
I don't remember that.
Okay. this is the worst. These are the worst.
I mean, like, the problem was it wasn't relevant in game 1 because, like, I just blocked a 3/3 with it, and the indestructible trigger didn't matter.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't do anything either way. I just crushed him.
Trying to think what else I should be asking.
Whatever you feel.
Yeah, no, it's just when they both don't remember playing Avison before. I guess so. Unfortunately, you didn't announce your trigger, so it's going to be mistrigger, and I'm going to ask if your opponent wants it on the stack. I think that's how it's handled still. This is what I get for my
are you saying that, like, I have to, like, announce obvious things like this? Like, I thought that, you know, there's things like, you don't only have to announce things like when they're relevant to the game state and invisible. Like, Exalted works that way, right?
Yeah. How did you even get this far?
Yes.
Because I'm playing against people who are honest instead of rules lawyering me all day.
Well, you know what? You're part of it. You're a player. You should know what your cards do.
I told you what it did. You're saying it doesn't do that. Like, come on, Judge.
All right. What we're going to ask is that you step away from the table over.
Sure.
Divas.
So you brought up that he's been rules related. Can you kind of go over like how the matches, the games have been going?
I mean, like, literally, like, he's every step of the way, like, he's being, like, technical this, technical that. He's asking, he's talking, like, priority and all this stuff. Like, I'm like, I just want to play the game. I just, you know, like, this is, like, round 7. I'm tired. And, like, I made the most obvious play possible. I think he's just salty that it was a blowout. And he's just like, well, let me try to get a judge and see if I can get, you know, get the angle. He's angle shooting. Okay.
Hi. What's up? You want to, sure. Wait for a second. This is how I would do this.
Yeah.
Do you want me to speak? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So, go. Sorry. Yeah. So this is how I see it. So my player is playing to a slow extent, and even though I am an L2, I feel that all players, well, especially judges, should know what the games do, especially remember their turns. Now, being said that, I have not been ruling this entire time. However, I'm just progressing, showing my opponent what the cards do, and if they missed it, it's their fault.
All right. I am going to stick with the mistrigger. I'm going to ask you to put it on the stack because you didn't announce that. You didn't announce the indestructibility. And if I'm wrong, everyone can tell me I'm wrong later.
Your creatures are dying. It's not like no.
Seriously, like this.
How did you got this far? That's my
Can I like appeal to someone? Like, you were like the worst judge. You're gonna cost me this game.
No, he's not the worst judge. You need to get your cards.
Would you like me to get the head judge?
Yeah, and you are the head judge.
What? No, I demand a recount.
Pause there. Let's give them a hand. All right, so a couple things I want to get on. I have like 30 seconds and I want to give away 2 things. One, the way Steve reacted at the end of this to the judge call. I want to point out, Amanda, the one thing you said was, if everyone here thinks I'm wrong, let me know after. Did you make
No,
the
no,
call?
no, no, I meant more for the,
Yeah.
the money.
If-
I don't know, like, I haven't.
Yeah, no, I'm fine that that's meta.
Yeah.
Did you feel that you made the best call you could?
Based on my current rules knowledge, yes.
Okay, perfect. So, in that mind, you did your best.
Yeah.
There was obviously a negative reaction to this. Steve, being Steve, was Steve. Alright? He reacted in a way that you might not like. But at the end of the day, yeah, exactly, that's fine. Because you did everything you thought was correct, okay? So that's all, thank you.
I've gotten Judge calls wrong before, so.
Oh, please. You were fine. Alright, so a review slide, just going over everything I talked about, the sources of confrontation, where they come from, that it's going to happen, and just an overview of the 4 agreements. These slides are going to be available after the conference. I'm going to put them on the forums so you can read. But first, I have 2 things I want to give away. Alright? So first, Steve, get up here. Alright. So Steve was Steve, volunteered awesomely, and gave a very emotional presentation. So Steve, I have a copy of the 4 agreements for you. And somebody who talked. I have no idea. Chris pointing to Manny. Come on. No, I really like what you added at the beginning of the presentation. It gave me an insight that I didn't think originally. So that was awesome. You also get a copy. All right. One thing, if you guys are interested in the book or you want to talk to me about it, it's on Amazon. It's not all that expensive. It's a really good tool. I read it constantly just to not make sure I keep myself knocked down. If you like the presentation, I'm glad you did. I'm definitely willing to hear questions afterward because we ran out of time. I have the questions that I didn't answer on here, and I'll make sure to try and get to them. I do want to say thank you. You guys are awesome for watching, listening, and all that, and I hope you have a good rest of the conference.
Don't forget